What a start to the day two of Nuke Tech and such a powerful panel on that engaging topic. I frankly, I'm not to be blamed if I kind of forget what I have to speak. But okay, so I'll put a disclaimer before I start. After the next 30 minutes or so, chances are that a few of you may go on to delete a couple of apps on your phone or start to disagree to agree to every terms and conditions that pops up on various platforms that we use, or even start asking a strong why every time someone requests for our personal data. I'll start this talk with a presumption by saying a personal space is dear to all of us, isn't it? Today, we live our lives on full public view on social platforms, purchasing goods online, posting photos of the food we just ate, or even sharing those little intimate moments that we share with our loved near and dear ones. But there are still things that we would rather not share with the world. Indeed, it is privacy that sets man apart from animals. But I think mankind was never born private. Privacy evolved over time as we developed technologies to wall ourselves while being part of the human society at large. But just as some technologies enhanced privacy, there were certain, like the camera, in all its forms that we may have used or we may have seen, was never designed to protect privacy in the first place. Today, there is little doubt that we all are being snooped upon. Our data is being shared to data traders who inadvertently influence your and mine internet behaviors. Let's take these voice assistants for a reference. If I simply decode it, it's essentially a microphone that is connected to the internet and listening to your voice. But while I may soon forget the question after I get a response from, say, Alexa, Amazon may still remember it. Most of you here would be using these voice assistants, or what they are called as smart speakers. But how often have you noticed or took cognizance of its privacy settings? Consciously, it's an opt-out choice, which means by default, if you do not change those settings, your voice, which is the data, is being recorded for what they claim to be accuracy and quality purposes, but there are no clear guidelines or for various purposes that what they may use for, whether it's about profiling you, whether it's about giving ad recommendations, and so on and so forth. And this is where I start connecting things and realize that why these smart speakers are so cheap, because the real price is our data. Many of us here would have watched The Social Dilemma, and there's a classic saying in it that goes like, if you do not pay for the product, you are the product. But is that absolutely unethical? I mean, there could be a counter viewpoint by the big techs who can argue that they are right in their sense to make advertising revenue because they are providing you platforms where you have information for search available in your fingertips, or giving you platforms where you can exchange those social experiences with your near and dear ones, something that was unimaginable till 2 decades ago. So while data has made it easier to avail services on the internet, there are those who also worry about people's private data being put to ill use. China, for one, is building a social credit scoring system of its citizens, which does something similar. It will attempt to score its citizens as good or bad basis their internet behaviors or their social behaviors, and making use of their personal data. But all of these use cases may not really seem glorious. Using technology like facial recognition, online and offline surveillance, or even something, like getting access to your private conversations, the citizens could be either blacklisted or greenlisted for availing public and private services. Chances are that you may lose your citizen rights to book a flight or a train or even avail a loan if you stand blacklisted. So, the point I'm trying to make here is that we don't react the same way to someone intruding to our personal data compared to someone, say, trespassing our personal property. And that's why whenever there's a pop-up, that asks for your consent, we immediately checkbox it without reading those terms and conditions, isn't it? We humans are programmed like that. Very recently, a new notification has been popping up on our WhatsApp screens, which talks about some privacy policy that has got updated. I started reading that, and it was not more than 3,820 words. So I spent some time. And here I'm not really going to, kind of share my interpretation of whether it is right or wrong. But one thing I want to talk about here is that a very peculiar thing is that it does not give you a choice. It's an absolutely take it or a leave it policy. Today, we may be used to these free services for various chat apps that we use, but it's a very fundamental question that who's paying for these services? I won't be surprised that if in the near future you will have to pay for using platforms like WhatsApp, or if you don't pay, start seeing ads on WhatsApp, or if you don't do either, then you share your personal data for them to monetize. One way or the other, we have to pay. I was distressed a few days back when I read this news of this 36-year-old man from the Telangana state of India who was subject to unbearable humiliation and harassment due to the non-repayment of the loans that he had availed from one of those myriad of unregulated micro lending apps. These apps targeted subprime borrowers like him who did not have formal credit or would not get a loan otherwise, and they took control of personal data like text messages, contact list, and in this case, they made calls to his friends and family from his contact list, all with an intention to defame and shame him. Unfortunately, this person resorted to the extreme step of suicide. And when I kind of look at it, there are myriad of such perfidious data examples, of unethical data collection and use of personal data, but not all use cases, kind of make us lose hope. In these times, data can also be used as a weapon to fight the pandemic and used as a tool to tackle the virus. And so many of us have been used to, all these contact tracing apps, which has collected all our personal data, though it may have a very, very benign aim. But there have been also calls about the risk for digital privacy because you really do not know what else it may be used for, calling for more data openness and responsible use. The COVID-19 pandemic was, in a lot of sense, I see it as an information problem. Let's take this example of Taiwan. It's only 81 miles off the coast of China and was expected to be really hit hard by the coronavirus, thanks to its proximity and the number of flights between the island nation and its massive neighbor to its west. But yet, the most successful data model to fight this pandemic comes from Taiwan, which never went into a lockdown and had remarkable success with their face mask regulations and their quarantine solutions that they have built, all by employing open data for what is called as participatory self-surveillance. No doubt, Taiwan ranks first in the Global Open Data Index. Or let me tell you another story, from the West Kalimantan district in Indonesia. When denied official government data, these villagers collected the aerial mapping data of their land and used it to fight against the illegal miners, and that data helped them to win the case, and eventually they empowered their community and saved the environment from illegal use cases of mining. Another very interesting example, I don't know how many of you would have used this browser, which is called as Brave. It's designed with a privacy based mindset, and it natively blocks various ad trackers and third party cookies that monitor your activity as you travel across the web. So if you see now, there is a deep and pervasive data asymmetry that exists in our society. Data subjects or data owners do not really have much idea what is being done to their data, and data controllers go about collecting as much data as they can and processing it in so many techniques that, in essence, we really do not have any clue what all that processing what all impact that processing will have on us. And this is where I also believe that the cliched quote that data is the new oil is now antiquated, or it's becoming too slippery to regulate. Data needs to be aggregated for the common good of citizens, and this is what democratization data means, which is giving specific sets of data access to the relevant users for the benefit of the society, and in essence, giving control of the data to the data owners. Data is empowering when it's in the hands of the citizens, giving them freedom and choice. When I talk of, data empowerment, this asymmetry that I talked about can be reversed by moving towards an empowered community that democratizes data with an open ecosystem that complies to various data regulation laws and protects the data by use of technology. Let's, kind of repeal them one by one. I talked about democratization of data. Talking of data compliance or data loss, I'm sure when I, talk about these two words, the first thing that comes to our mind is GDPR. So the best thing that the GDPR has done is that it has put a price tag in the form of penalties for any form of data breach, which act as, a deterrent for responsible data use, something which was not so well regulated, in the previous years. And that is why you see companies and groups like the Marriott, the Google have been fined millions of pounds, and even others have come under the scanner for not complying to the data protection rules of late. And by the way, the WhatsApp example that I talked about, thanks to the tighter privacy and legislations of GDPR, the members of the 27 countries of the European Union will not have to share their data to third parties, unlike their other global counterparts. In India, the Supreme Court recognized privacy as a fundamental right in response to a writ petition challenging the constitutional validity of the Aadhaar framework. The court noted observations in the data in the digital economy, dangers of data mining, and the need for a data protection law. India, as I talk today, is still in the process of legislating its data protection bill, much in similar lines to the GDPR in EU. It's estimated that the digital economy will grow all the way up to $1 trillion in 2022, and all the global players who would want to, take a pie of that will have to comply with these laws very soon. And if you take a global outlook, world over, there are a long list of these privacy initiatives that are, emerging, which only indicates the importance of data protection in today's age. And if you compile these laws together, they would in various forms point out to these key principles, which ensures a lawful, fair, easily comprehensible, and transparent data collection practices. Whether it is about, say, your right to request and access your personal data from the data controllers free of cost, or something which is very unique and interesting, what is known as right to be forgotten, where you can demand that your data is erased in various platforms where you have shared once the purpose for which that data is given has been met, or if you think that the data is not accurate in, or not updated with time. In the next 2 years, Gartner says that 65% of the world's population will come under modern privacy regulations, which is somewhere at around only 10% today. So imagine that huge shift that's going to coming in the next 2 years. And with that, the cost of compliance for product companies like us or product solutions world over will definitely go up. And if you relate to the slide that I kind of talked just a while back about various privacy initiatives, to simply put, a piecemeal strategy of addressing one by one all these regulations will never be sustainable. And hence, there will be calls for a single standardization of all these global laws that can hold good globally. When I talk about this, I think it's also very important to understand the right classification of data. And all the laws that I talked about so far majorly focus on personal data. But there is also the world of non-personal data, which you may imagine typically do not contain your personal identifiable information. But with the advancements in technology and especially AI, today you can mine out personal data from these non-personal data sets, which means very soon we may see that the non-personal data may also be need to be brought under the data protection umbrella. I'm very sure now, with my talk so far, a lot of you, would blame technology for this current data privacy imbroglio. But hold on. I also believe that it is technology which can help solve it as well. And this is where privacy enhancing technologies, or PETs as they are called in the technology world, come in. They are a broad range of technologies designed to extract the value of data. And when I say the value of data, it could be the commercial, the scientific, and the social potential of the data without risking the privacy and security of the information behind it. To put together a very simple definition, they embody fundamental data protection principles by allowing businesses to leverage this increasing amount of data in this big data world, and ensuring that the personal or the sensitive information still stays private. The information security specialists in today's age classify data into these three states: data at rest, data in transit, and data in use. While we have all gotten really good about encrypting data at rest, which is typically in our in our hard drives or in our servers, or sending data back and forth across encrypted channels, but now is the need that the data in use also needs to be protected. PETs, or privacy enhancing technologies that I talked about in this secure realm of computing, like homomorphic encryption, pseudonymization, differential privacy, zero knowledge, multi-party computing, and so many others, are emerging increasingly significant in ensuring that the value of data gets unlocked without risking its privacy, or without really someone having to mine all the personal information from the personal data sets. Here I'm going to talk about the first three examples with an illustration. After almost a decade in the labs, homomorphic encryption is emerging as one of the top methods of privacy enhancing technologies. And to simply put, encryption on any computation on encrypted data is what is homomorphic encryption. You can still do technology or apply technology like machine learning when your data is yet encrypted. Let me take a very small example, or rather a story, which I call it as Alice Jewelry Store. Alice is a jewelry store owner, and she has a lot of raw materials that needs to be put together to assemble it into a wearable jewelry. But the problem is that she does not trust her workers and hence puts all this inside a locked glove box. The workers can attach their hands to the gloves, work on these raw materials, and convert it into a final product. Once done, Alice can unlock this box and use the product, which is the jewelry here. In analogy to homomorphic encryption, if you look at the fact here that you don't really need to know the data on which you are working to create a final solution or a final product. Anonymization. So anonymization ensures that the core identity of the personal data is not leaked. Anonymization is more of a one-way process, which means once a data has been anonymized, it rather becomes impossible for it to be converted back into a personal data set. Thanks to the AI and the ML techniques of technology today, anonymization has been rather, rendered insufficient in today's world. And this is where concepts like pseudonymization comes in. So with pseudonymization, you tend to replace your pieces of personal data with fictional data sets, what are known as pseudonyms or tokens. These pseudonyms replaces your personal data attributes in, say, the application data set and are stored separately in the lookup tables. It is built with an intent to re-identify your personal data, yet without revealing the complete personal data set. Another very interesting, piece of the privacy enhancing technologies is in the world of differential privacy. It is achieved through a range of complicated techniques, which adds a noise. And when I say noise, it could be a random data set to the original raw data set, which is used to process the data. When systems are designed to be differentially private, they allow companies to gather the data that they need to train their algorithms while still helping to keep the data subjects anonymous. For example, in Apple's word and emoji suggestions algorithms, the company has established a system that adds this so-called noise to what the user types to keep the information private. All right, so I believe you've got a great insight into the pets of the technology world. And I strongly believe that in the time to come, they are going to emerge really significant and introduce new paradigms and modalities of data usage. When I talk about them, when I talk about technology and data protection, another very interesting spectrum of data protection and consensual utilization is emerging the world over and in the contemporary world. To simply put, it works on the fundamental that because nobody trusts anyone with the data, why not put the users or the data owners themselves in control of their own data? And the best example of this concept that comes to my mind and what has been talked, a while back is of India Stack. India Stack is, to again simply put, a set of APIs that can be used by the developers, businesses, startups, and the entire developer ecosystems of the economy to utilize this public digital infrastructure to solve India's hardbound problems by moving towards a presenceless, paperless, and a cashless service delivery. And the final layer of India Stack is the consent layer, what is also going to be represented by the data empowerment and protection architecture. This DEPA framework is really important because as we Indians become data rich at an exponential pace, it provides us a trusted data sharing framework without having to worry about sharing our entire piece of data set. So which means I can be enabled to share that granular piece of data which needs to be unlocked for giving me a service. It introduces a very important and a very exciting concept of consent manager who are going to act as the intermediary to collect those data and protect your data rights. This entire architecture is going to be rather the first robust implementation of such a huge architecture to be put to use in such a huge economy at scale. It will help us replace those costly and cumbersome techniques of screen scraping, or those physical data submissions, or even providing blanket consents, which totally renders the consents without meaning and empowers the individuals. The consent managers are data blind, which means they will never get to know what is that personal data that they are helping facilitate, and they are only going to ensure that an end-to-end encrypted data flow happens when they act as the conduits. And it can unlock great potentials from tapping onto those little informations of your health diagnosis and giving you providing better access to healthcare, or something like uh, reaching out to the bottommost pyramids of society, by including them into the formal credit system, because their data is typically in silos and not in the in the traditional systems where you do their assessments for small ticket lending. Another similar model comes from Barcelona, a city that is aiming to extend its smart city infrastructure to an altogether different level. The decentralized decode stack or the project puts the local citizens in control of whether they keep their personal data private or share it for the public good, allowing them to participate directly in the government just like we do on social media. And by sharing their specific data, they can influence the public policies and the services in areas as wide as affordable housing, energy transition, air quality, etc. Hence moving from a model of surveillance capitalism where typically the data is very opaque and not transparent, to a model of data democracy. At this point I would want to reflect back that we have witnessed one-fifth of the 21st century, and some experts would want to call it a digital economy. Margaret Vestager, the person whom you see here, one of the most vocal voices of data rights globally, very rightly sums it up, saying that in this digital economy, it's important that we regain the trust of the citizens by ensuring that there is a very fair practice of how the data is being processed and how it is being accessed. IDC predicts that by 2025 the collective sum of the world's data would grow up to 175 zettabytes. You and me, average humans, will have 5,000 digital interactions per day, and almost 50% of the world's data will be stored in public cloud environments, which definitely brings me to a thought that the next 20 years of this century will be a true data economy. As we move towards a data empowered community, new roles of data protection officers and data stewards will arise. They will assume newer responsibilities and fill the gaps in this data protective world that we are talking about, while the existing responsibilities of the product designers, product engineers, and the marketers will transform. The future of data is indeed glorious. And I say that because this entire stringent privacy regulations that I'm talking about will soon be looked out by organizations as an opportunity to gain competitive advantage and gain the trust of the consumers, of the businesses to whom we serve. And this will be the key business strategy, because trust takes years to build, but only an instant to destroy. Trust me, will become the new currency of the data economy. And maybe let's expect that RP will be able to trust the Cortana like applications that he just shared with us yesterday. And before I close, let me also predict that in the not so distant world, solutions around personal data use will spark new levels of innovation and ensure that the data asymmetry that I talked about will shift towards data empowerment, which is what the new world order needs in the coming time. Thank you.